I'm here with Tom Pryor. What do you do here, Tom?
That's a tough one. I spend most of my time thinking about how to make the website better, the content that you can look at the website, the videos, how they string together, all the exercises. Yeah, how can we make that better for students, make it better for people making the content to put the content on the website.
Well, what's that role called?
That's a product manager.
Product manager.
Yeah.
So is this what all product managers do?
Well, yeah. I think most product managers will probably tell you something very different, even just in our role. I think part of it is being the glue to make sure that whatever needs to happen that other folks aren't doing happens. And that varies so much depending on your team, the rest of the people you're working with, and what your skills are. So we all do similar things, and just making sure that what we think is necessary and what the organization thinks is great for the site or the apps happen. But day to day, that can be totally different, just from single day to day versus like different people could be working on very different things.
Well, what is an indicative day for you? Maybe not every day is the same, but
yeah,
just example.
Yeah. Well, I pick a day. So yesterday, I spent the first half of the morning looking at different projects that some of my team members were working on, and one of them was rethinking our video page and how can we have all of our other content on there so users can find it easily. Another one was thinking about how can users ask questions of each other on the site and get them answered quickly. And they were just small projects, maybe 2 to 4 weeks long. And then the other half of the day I spent with our head of content and head of product thinking about what are we going to launch at back to school time in September, and what are we going to launch at the end of the year, and then how do we work backwards. And so that was long-term thinking out, not thinking from 2 weeks to 4 weeks or what's going to happen tomorrow when the project starts, but like where do we want to be at the end of the year.
So when you talk about these projects, like these projects to rethink, say, the video page, who works on that? Like, who makes that happen?
Yeah, so that is our designers and our engineers, who are pretty fantastic, and a lot of the time could do all of the job without any help from me or even an engineer. They're pretty multi-talented, but if we want to box people for ease of understanding, our designer will work towards the start of a project saying, what's our objective for the user? What's the user experience? Okay, what's the workflow that we want the user to have to get that experience? And then later on, how can that look visually actually on the app or the site?
A lot of people associate design with only that last part, the visuals, but that's only a part of it. It's much more what's the whole experience going to be like?
Yeah, it's definitely like the last piece, and probably the easiest piece. Most of them will tell you understanding, empathizing with the user is the toughest part, and making sure that what you're building, the basics of it, match to what the user wants is really tough. And after that, there's a few different ways you can design it and then build it. But the designers will spend a lot of the time.
So that's what the designer does. Who else is typically on these teams?
And then engineers will be on there as well. And we've got different flavors of engineers who have different skills. Some of them can mainly work on what it looks like to the user on the front end, so the user interface, and others will work on the back end of how all of the things are moving behind that you'd never see working.
What are those? Because I think for people, what does the back end mean?
Yeah, it could mean the knowledge map, for example, the statistical model of, well, we know that most people who got that question you just got right also know these things, so we're not going to ask you as many questions in that, or we're going to assume that you know that and push you up to another level. So that's on the data science piece. Also, all of the data, where does that live? How do we make sure that the website is running fast? Because we're trying to optimize for milliseconds of when that video loads. All of that you don't really see, but a lot of there's tens of developers here working on that, and a lot of effort goes into making that as smooth and as fast as possible.
And then, so I get the designer, I get what the engineers are doing, and then the role of the product manager is
to try and help them do their job as best they can, essentially. Maybe if they're fantastic, we're not needed, but it's let's be really sure and fill in those gaps. And so a lot of the time it'll be, most of the involvement will be at the start to be like, are we set up for success? Do we have the right scope to make sure that the goal is clear?
What are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing? What's our goal? What's success? What's not success?
Exactly. And at different points we'll check in to make sure things are going well, because it's easier to sometimes better to come in from a somewhat outside perspective. You haven't been thinking about this really gnarly problem really hard for the last 2 days, and we could come in and be like, oh, well, maybe we could think about it this way, or maybe we don't have to do it that way. We could try another way. So that helps. And then at the end, if something's built, then we can also work with the marketing team to make sure that it gets out to users. We can test it with users and help make sure that this is what users want. And if there's some feedback on it saying, actually, this little bit's tricky to understand, or we really don't like the look of that, then we can say, okay, for the next revision, let's fix that.
And have you always been a product manager?
No.
What's your background? What were you doing before this?
Yeah, I was doing. It was a bit of a strange route to get here. Out of school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I did management consulting, which is what a lot of people do when they don't know what they want to do. So that's, you're working on a bunch of very different projects for different companies, just trying to solve something for them. Should we enter this market? What should we do to stop this product from failing? All those things. And that was in Sydney, and I loved it. And it helped me figure out what I really wanted to do. And I worked on a couple of education projects and just realized this is by far the biggest social lever that we could ever have. I want to work on that and maximize my impact. And it was super rewarding as well. So if you're being pretty selfish, it's a fun thing to work on personally. So after that, I just went after things that I thought could have a big impact in education. Did some stuff with Teach for Australia when it was starting up, then worked for an impact investing fund that was looking into getting into education in the developing world. And then I moved to a specific education fund that was investing in low-cost private schools in India, which is fantastic, because that's where people need it the most and really interesting, but would have required a bunch of travel. And I wasn't really ready for that, nor was the family. So it's like, okay, how can we have really big impact in education but not have to travel, have a much bit of a better lifestyle? I'm like, no, technology is doing a pretty good job of that. I've heard of some things like Khan Academy. And I came out, we moved out here to Bay Area to work at a place like this, and this was probably my dream job. Maybe 6 months or 9 months later, a role came open and the opportunity was there, and I started off doing email marketing. That was the first thing I came in to do, because we didn't have a way to email our 7 million users at the time, and had to figure out how to do that. And that kind of snowballed into a bunch of other marketing, product marketing, working on growth, and then found myself working on the product, which is fun because I've always been pretty opinionated about the product, and now it's quite scary having to be responsible for it.
And what advice would you have for someone who wants to do what you're doing? It's very hard to anticipate exactly what you do as a product manager. So some of the advice would be just get as much experience being involved in making projects happen as possible. As much as possible as you can. And so consulting is really good for that, because there are always projects that have a pretty clear scope and you've got to deliver, and that's similar to doing making products. But if you're a designer or an engineer, or you'd like to do each of those things, like doing that for a period of time, and then being part of the product development process, and then thinking, I'd like to also be part of the broader process around product, not just design or engineering. That's a great way to get into it, and I think that some of the best folks can do that. Coming from a user research background, if you really like conducting surveys and interviews with folks, then you get to really empathize with the user, and that's probably the most important piece. So I think you need a spike in one of those areas. So you need to understand the development process, or the design process, or the user research process, or the analytics side of things. I was doing a bunch of that, understanding the data, how our users were interacting on the site, and that's one of the strong lenses that I take when I think about the product. And then all you need to do is have decent process management skills, making sure you know how things are moving and are they happening right, and you'll be a great product manager if you can do that. Well, great. Well, thank you for explaining that.